The smell hit me first. Fresh-cut grass, diesel exhaust, wet Georgia clay, and something sharper underneath it all, stone dust. Not gravel. Not sidewalk concrete. Old marble, broken small enough to hang in the air like chalk. I parked my truck crooked on the shoulder outside Magnolia Ridge Estates and just sat there for a second, both hands locked around the steering wheel. The sunrise was barely touching the tops of the live oaks, turning the Spanish moss silver. Somewhere beyond the clubhouse, a mower droned in slow, lazy circles like nothing in the world was wrong. Then I heard the bulldozer blade scrape metal against earth. A long, ugly growl that went straight through my chest. I got out before I remembered to shut the door. My boots sank into damp red clay as I crossed the service road toward the old tree line. Or what used to be the tree line. The cedar fence posts my grandfather had walked me past every Memorial Day were gone. The blackberry thicket was gone. The little iron gate was gone. And where the Whitmore family cemetery had stood for more than 100 years, Magnolia Ridge had laid down a golf cart path. White sand glittered where my great-grandmother's grave used to be. Rolled sod sat stacked in green rectangles beside the raw dirt. Sprinkler flags fluttered in the morning breeze. A yellow bulldozer idled near the edge of the new fairway, its steel blades smeared with clay and pale chips of something I refused to identify at first. Then I saw the lamb. It was half buried beside a tire track, no bigger than a shoebox, carved from old marble and cracked clean across the neck. One tiny stone ear had snapped off. Mud filled the carved curls on its back. My knees bent before I told them to. I brushed the dirt away with my fingers, slow at first, then harder. My nails packed full of clay. A line of letters appeared beneath my thumb. Wit. That was all I needed. Behind me, a golf cart chirped as it reversed. Well, a woman's voice called out, sweet as syrup and twice as sticky, "You're not supposed to be back here." Vivian Ashcroft rolled up in a white golf cart with Magnolia Ridge's gold crest painted on the side. Pearl earrings. Cream blazer. Sunglasses big enough to hide a guilty conscience. She looked at the broken lamb in my hands, then at the torn-up ground, and her smile didn't move an inch. "You folks really should have removed those abandoned stones years ago," she said. "They were becoming a safety issue." I stood there with my dead sister's marker in my hands and listened to her call my family a landscaping problem. "My family is buried here," I said. Vivian sighed like I had brought the wrong wine to dinner. "Mr. Whitmore, this land is part of Magnolia Ridge recreational property now. The board approved the golf course expansion months ago. We can't let sentimental misunderstandings hold back community improvement." Behind her, 2 workers were stretching irrigation pipe across the dirt. Black plastic tubing hissed as it uncoiled, dragging right over the ground where my grandfather used to take his hat off and whisper names I was too young to understand. I looked past Vivian at the bright new fairway, the sand trap, the cart path, the flags, the perfect fake green laid over 33 graves. She thought grief would make me loud. It didn't. It made me still. Because what Vivian Ashcroft didn't know was that the dirt under her golf shoes still had my family's name on it. And I knew exactly where the paperwork was buried. My name is Caleb Whitmore, and I learned land the way some boys learn baseball. Not from books at first. From my grandfather's boots. Grandpa Samuel Whitmore had knees that cracked like dry branches and hands rough enough to snag cotton, but every Memorial Day he walked me around that cemetery like he was showing me the borders of a kingdom. He would stop at each cedar post, tap it with his cane, and make me say the line out loud. From the black oak to the creek bend. From the creek bend to the iron gate. From the iron gate back to the road. I was 8 the first time he pressed the old cemetery key into my palm. It was cold, heavy, black with age, and too big for my hand. A lock only matters, he told me, when somebody remembers what it protects. Back then, Magnolia Ridge Estates didn't exist. No clubhouse. No golf carts. No perfect lawns hissing under sprinklers. It was pine scrub, red dirt, and family names carved into stone. Whitmores had been buried there since horses still pulled wagons down the county road. My great-grandparents. 2 uncles. Cousins I only knew from stories. My parents, eventually. And one tiny grave my mother never liked to talk about. Her name was Lily Grace Whitmore. My baby sister. Stillborn before I was born. Grandpa showed me her marker once, a little marble lamb resting beside my mother's family plot. He didn't say much. Just took off his hat, squeezed my shoulder, and let the cicadas fill the silence. That cemetery taught me what ownership really meant. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about fences. It was memory with legal boundaries. Maybe that's why I became a county surveyor. While other men read box scores over coffee, I read plats, deeds, easements, and probate records. Lines on paper told stories if you knew how to listen. A crooked boundary could whisper theft. A missing signature could scream fraud. An old access road could outlive every rich person who tried to pave over it. When Grandpa died, his papers came to me in a cedar chest that smelled like pipe tobacco and dust. Inside were folded maps, brittle envelopes, tax receipts, and one hand-drawn burial map marked with 33 names. I kept it because he told me to. I kept the key because it felt like him. And standing there that morning with Lily Grace's broken lamb in my hands, I finally understood why he had made me memorize every inch. Vivian Ashcroft did not look like the kind of woman who destroyed things. That was the trick. She looked like charity luncheons, fresh hydrangeas, and handwritten thank you cards on cream stationery. She wore pearl earrings the size of aspirin tablets and heels sharp enough to puncture courtroom carpet. Her white Lexus was always parked crooked in front of the clubhouse, as if even the painted lines were expected to make room for her. Vivian had been president of the Magnolia Ridge HOA for 6 years. Before that, she chaired the landscaping committee. Before that, the Architectural Review Board. She had climbed the little ladder of suburban power one fake smile at a time, until people stopped calling her Vivian and started calling her Madam President as a joke. Only she never laughed when they said it. The golf course was her crown jewel. Magnolia Ridge already had 18 holes, but the back 9 was older, narrower, shaded by too many trees for her taste. Vivian wanted something brighter. Cleaner. More marketable. She called it the Magnolia Fairway expansion, and every HOA newsletter treated it like a civic miracle. Premium views. Elevated lifestyle. Historic Southern charm. That last phrase made my teeth press together. There was nothing historic about bulldozing history. I had seen the glossy renderings taped inside the clubhouse window weeks earlier, back when I still thought the expansion stopped short of our cemetery. Computer-generated families smiled beside emerald grass. Men in pastel polos shook hands near a sand trap. Children chased butterflies where my grandmother used to leave plastic flowers every Easter. The whole thing smelled like fresh paint, expensive coffee, and money trying to pretend it had manners. Vivian knew exactly how to sell it. She told residents their property values would jump. She promised fairway lots would make Magnolia Ridge the most desirable private community in the county. She said old and used land would finally serve a purpose. Unused. That was the word she kept using. Not sacred. Not private. Not protected. Unused. When I challenged her that morning, she didn't raise her voice. Women like Vivian didn't need to. She just tilted her chin, let the sunlight flash across her sunglasses, and spoke to me like I was a maintenance worker blocking her cart path. Mr. Whitmore, she said, communities evolve. Sentiment can't be allowed to freeze progress in place. Behind her, the sprinklers kicked on with a soft mechanical hiss. Water misted over the torn clay, the broken stones, and the grass seed they had spread like a blanket over the dead. Vivian smiled. And I understood something cold and simple. She hadn't erased my family by accident. She had branded it as progress. By noon, I knew the cemetery wasn't the end of it. The destruction had a sales office. I walked from the torn-up fairway toward the clubhouse with red clay drying on my jeans and marble dust still under my fingernails. The closer I got, the more the air changed. Diesel and wet earth faded into lemon polish, cut flowers, and that sterile blast of air conditioning rich people use to pretend the outside world can't touch them. Inside the lobby, a gold-framed display board stood near the pro shop. Magnolia Fairway Villas. 8 homes, all sketched in soft watercolor, each one angled toward the new 14th fairway like the view itself had been blessed. Little flags marked lots already labeled sold or pending. The price sheet sat beneath them in a clear acrylic holder. Fairway frontage premium. Historic landscape enhancement. Private recreational access. I stared at those words until they blurred. They hadn't destroyed 33 graves because they needed grass. They had destroyed them because dead Whitmores didn't pay HOA dues, but new homeowners with golf views did. Outside, beyond the clubhouse windows, I could see 2 of the villas already standing. Fresh brick. Black shutters. Copper lanterns. A couple in tennis whites walked across one of the back patios, sipping coffee and admiring the view where my grandmother used to kneel every Easter with a plastic bouquet and a handkerchief pressed to her nose. My stomach tightened so hard I could feel my pulse in my throat. I drove around to the old cemetery access road, the one Grandpa Samuel had used when his knees got bad. It should have run between 2 live oaks and ended at the iron gate. Instead, 3 landscaping boulders sat across it like giant gray fists. Fresh pine straw covered the tire marks. New azaleas had been planted in a neat curve, pretty enough to hide a crime if you didn't know where to look. A white sign had been stabbed into the ground. HOA recreational property. No trespassing. The paper came 2 days later. Certified mail. Cream envelope. Magnolia Ridge crest in dark green ink. The kind of letter that wants to feel official before you even open it. I unfolded it at my kitchen table while rain ticked softly against the windows. Notice of violation, unauthorized access to restricted golf course property. They accused me of trespassing. On my own family cemetery. They warned that any further interference with the Magnolia Fairway expansion could result in fines, legal action, and removal by security. At the bottom was Vivian Ashcroft's signature, looped and elegant, like a ribbon tied around a brick. I went back to the clubhouse that evening with the letter in one hand and Lily Grace's broken lamb marker wrapped in a towel in the other. Vivian met me under the portico, perfume cutting through the humid air. "You people always get emotional after progress has already started," she said. "My people?" I asked. Her smile thinned. "Your family," she said. "They should have kept better records." That was when I heard it again, the low hum under the new fairway. Irrigation lines running beneath the soil, pushing water through ground that had never belonged to them. Vivian thought she had buried the problem. All she had done was water the evidence. The patrol car rolled onto the cart path with its lights off, tires whispering over fresh pavement that still smelled like tar and rain. For one stupid second, I thought the sight of a uniform would make Vivian Ashcroft step back. It didn't. She met the officer beside the clubhouse doors, already holding a green folder against her chest. Her smile was calm. Her pearls didn't move. My hands were still dirty from digging my sister's marker out of mud. Officer Daniels was polite, tired, and careful in the way small-town officers get when they realize a rich neighborhood dispute is about to ruin their morning. I showed him the torn ground. I showed him the broken marble lamb. I pointed to the new cart path crossing the place where my grandfather used to stop and remove his hat. "This was a family cemetery," I said. "They destroyed graves. Vivian opened her folder like a magician revealing the dove. Magnolia Ridge completed all internal approvals for recreational land improvement, she said. Mr. Whitmore is upset because some old decorative stones were removed from a neglected area. Decorative stones. The words made my jaw tighten until my teeth hurt. Daniels looked from her paperwork to the fairway. Then to me. His face softened, but not enough to help. Mr. Whitmore, he said quietly, this looks like a civil property issue. I can take a report, but I can't stop permitted work unless the county tells me to. The bulldozer kept idling behind him, coughing black smoke into the wet morning air. So I went to the county office. Same result, different building. The clerk behind the glass smelled like peppermint gum and printer toner. She pulled the subdivision plat, frowned at the screen, and told me the Magnolia Ridge recreational parcel appeared to include the back section near the golf course. The old cemetery line wasn't showing cleanly in the current system. That doesn't mean you're wrong, she said, lowering her voice. It just means the records are messy. Messy. Vivian had turned my family into a clerical inconvenience. The first attorney I called charged $400 just to tell me bad news in a room full of leather chairs. He flipped through my notes, tapped his pen twice, and said fighting an HOA with development money could take years. Unless you have something recorded and undeniable, he said, they'll bury you in procedure. 3 days later, Vivian held the ribbon cutting. White tent. Silver scissors. Champagne flutes sweating in the heat. Residents clapped while standing on ground that still held my bloodline beneath it. I stood outside the rope line with Lily Grace's broken lamb marker wrapped in a towel against my chest. Grief hadn't worked. Truth, spoken out loud, hadn't worked. So I stopped trying to be heard. I went home, opened Grandpa Samuel's cedar chest, and started looking for something recorded and undeniable. Grandpa Samuel's cedar chest sat at the back of my hall closet under a stack of winter blankets nobody in Georgia ever really needed. When I dragged it into the kitchen, the brass handles bit cold crescents into my palms. The lid groaned open, and that old smell rose out of it, pipe tobacco, dust, cedar oil, and paper aging in the dark. For a second, I was 8 years old again, standing beside my grandfather while he unfolded maps with hands that knew every creek bend in the county. I worked until the sun went down. Then until the rain stopped. Then until the only sound in the house was the refrigerator humming and the soft rasp of paper sliding across my kitchen table. Tax receipts. Probate letters. Survey sketches. Yellowed envelopes tied with string. I found the hand-drawn burial map first, folded inside a Bible with a cracked black cover. 33 names written in Grandpa's careful block letters. Each grave marked by distance from the iron gate, the black oak, and the creek bend. Lily Grace Whitmore was there. So were my parents. So were people Vivian Ashcroft had called decorative stones. I drove to the county archives the next morning with coffee burning my tongue and red clay still under my nails. The records room smelled like old carpet, toner, and fluorescent lights. I knew the clerk there, and she knew me well enough not to ask why my hands were shaking when I requested the pre-subdivision deed books. The first hour gave me nothing but headaches. The second gave me a page number. The third gave me my family back. Book 17. Page 284. The 1894 Whitmore Cemetery Deed. The ink had faded brown, but the language was clean enough to cut glass. 2.8 acres reserved in perpetuity for Whitmore family burial use. Not conveyed. Not merged. Not abandoned. A recorded access easement from the county road to the cemetery gate. From the black oak to the creek bend. From the creek bend to the iron gate. From the iron gate back to the road. Grandpa hadn't been teaching me memories. He'd been teaching me legal description. I paid for certified copies with fingers that barely worked, then pulled the probate file tied to Grandpa Samuel's estate. There it was, buried 3 pages behind an inventory of tools and savings bonds, successor trustee, cemetery parcel and family burial records. My name. Caleb Whitmore. Vivian hadn't just bulldozed old land. She had bulldozed land I was legally responsible for protecting. 2 days later, the forensic survey team walked the fairway while golfers stood behind temporary ropes whispering like they were watching a crime scene. The ground-penetrating radar unit rolled over the new grass with a low electric buzz, back and forth across the 14th fairway, the sand trap, and the cart path. The technician didn't say much at first. People who work around graves learn to be quiet. But I saw his face change when the screen filled with rectangular shadows beneath the soil. Evenly spaced. Human-sized. Too many to explain away. He marked each one with a small orange flag. By the time he finished, the new fairway looked like it had broken out in warning signs. 33 disturbances matched Grandpa's burial map. The irrigation line ran straight through the middle of them. I stood there with the certified deed in one hand and the radar report in the other, listening to sprinklers click uselessly in the distance. Vivian had wanted a golf course view. Now she had a map of everything she buried. The hardest thing I did was nothing. Not at first. Every part of me wanted to walk into Vivian Ashcroft's office, drop the certified deed on her polished desk, and watch that perfect smile crack. I wanted to slam the radar report down beside it. I wanted her to see every orange flag on that fairway and understand exactly what she had done. But Grandpa Samuel's voice kept coming back to me. Measure twice. Cut once. So I let Vivian keep talking. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread that I was making accusations about the Magnolia Fairway expansion, and the clubhouse smelled like perfume, coffee, and nervous money. Residents whispered behind paper programs. Golf committee members sat stiff in the front row. Vivian took her place at the podium beneath a framed watercolor of the course, looking calm enough to make innocence seem rehearsed. I sat in the back with my phone face up on my knee, recording where Georgia law allowed it. Vivian tapped the microphone. "Let me be very clear," she said. There were no documented graves in the improvement area. No cemetery was shown on the Magnolia Ridge property records. Any stones removed were decorative remnants from an abandoned family site with no active legal status. Every sentence landed like a shovel bite. I didn't interrupt. She kept going. The board acted properly. The land is HOA recreational property. Mr. Whitmore is emotionally attached to a misunderstanding, and while we sympathize, this community cannot be held hostage by folklore. Folklore. 33 names became folklore under fluorescent lights. After the meeting, a man in a work shirt brushed past me near the side exit. He smelled like sawdust and cigarette smoke. His hand bumped mine, and a folded paper slid against my palm. "Check the second line item," he muttered without looking back. In my truck, under the yellow dome light, I unfolded it. Contractor invoice. Stone removal and subsurface clearing, cemetery expansion zone. Not brush removal. Not debris. Stone removal. They knew. The next morning, a title officer I had worked with years earlier called me from a blocked number. Her voice was low, careful. "Caleb," she said, "those fairway villa surveys don't match the cemetery carve-out. 8 homes overlap your parcel. Partial encroachment at minimum." I closed my eyes and listened to rain ticking against the windshield. There it was. The thing Vivian sold. The thing the board financed. The thing families had moved into with granite countertops and fairway views. Built over protected burial land. By Friday afternoon, my attorney filed the emergency injunction, the cemetery desecration complaint, and the title challenge. Attached were the deed, the burial map, the radar report, the contractor invoice, and the villa survey conflicts. Vivian had spent months building a golf course over my family. I spent 1 week turning every lie she told into evidence. The courtroom smelled like floor wax, old paper, and rain drying off wool coats. Vivian sat 3 tables away in a cream suit, hands folded neatly on top of a leather binder. Her pearls were back. So was the smile. But this time it kept slipping at the corners. Her attorney stood first and tried to make it sound small. A boundary misunderstanding. A maintenance decision. An unfortunate emotional response from a family member confused by outdated records. The judge listened without blinking. Then my attorney stood and placed the certified deed on the evidence table. The room changed. You could feel it, like air pressure dropping before a storm. "This is the 1894 Whitmore Cemetery Deed," he said. "Recorded. Valid. Never conveyed to Magnolia Ridge Estates, never merged into HOA recreational property, and never abandoned." Vivian's attorney reached for his papers too quickly. My attorney kept going. He displayed Grandpa Samuel's hand-drawn burial map beside the modern survey overlay. 33 names. 33 locations. Then the ground-penetrating radar report came up on the screen, and the quiet in that courtroom turned heavy enough to press against my ribs. Rectangular shadows under the 14th fairway. Under the sand trap. Under the cart path. The judge leaned forward. "Those are grave shafts?" he asked. The forensic surveyor adjusted his glasses. "Yes, Your Honor. Consistent in size, spacing, and orientation with historic human burials. They matched the submitted burial map." Vivian stopped smiling. Then came the invoice. "Stone removal and subsurface clearing, cemetery expansion zone." My attorney let that line sit there long enough for everyone to read it twice. Vivian's face had gone the color of wet chalk. Her attorney whispered in her ear, but she barely moved. The same woman who had called my family folklore now stared at her own paperwork, proving they knew exactly what they were grinding into the dirt. The judge's voice cut through the room. "Mrs. Ashcroft, did the board authorize removal of stones from an area identified to contractors as a cemetery expansion zone?" Vivian opened her mouth. For once, nothing polished came out. "It was my understanding," she finally said, "that the area had no active legal status." The judge looked at the deed, then at the burial map, then at the radar report. "Your understanding was expensive," he said. That was the first crack. The second came when the title survey conflicts were entered. 8 fairway villas overlapped the Whitmore Cemetery parcel. Not by inches. Not by a decorative fence line. Foundations, patios, drainage, and back walls crossed into protected burial land. The families sitting behind Vivian started whispering. One man stood halfway up, red-faced. His wife grabbed his sleeve and hissed for him to sit down. A board member in a navy blazer leaned away from Vivian like arrogance was contagious. By the end of the hearing, the judge granted the emergency injunction. All work on the Magnolia Fairway expansion stopped immediately. The 14th fairway closed. The cart path closed. The irrigation system was ordered shut down pending investigation. A state cemetery protection officer was assigned to oversee the site, and the court ordered Magnolia Ridge to preserve every document tied to the project. Then came the line that made Vivian grip the edge of the table. The 8 villas built on the cemetery parcel were subject to immediate title review and temporary vacate orders through the court. No screaming. No dramatic music. Just a gavel tapping once. Justice sounded smaller than I expected. Outside, rain pattered on the courthouse steps while residents crowded under the awning, calling attorneys, lenders, insurance agents. Vivian walked past me without her sunglasses. Mascara had gathered beneath one eye. I didn't say a word. I just held the deed folder against my chest and listened, in my mind, to sprinklers going silent over 33 graves. 3 weeks after the hearing, the golf course went quiet. No mowers humming at sunrise. No golf carts chirping in reverse. No sprinklers clicking over stolen ground. Just wind moving through the live oaks and the dull thud of work boots where investigators, surveyors, and restoration crews walked carefully between orange flags. The Magnolia fairway expansion came out piece by piece. First the cart path. Then the sand trap. Then the irrigation pipe that had been humming under my family like a secret machine. When the crew pulled it from the clay, mud clung to the black plastic in thick red ropes. Nobody spoke much. Even the men paid to dig knew the difference between construction and apology. The 8 villas were emptied under court order after the title review confirmed what the survey conflict had already shown. Moving trucks lined the curb in front of homes that still smelled like new paint and granite dust. Families carried boxes through front doors they had been told were permanent. I did not cheer. I did not smile. Those people had been sold a lie too. But they had been living where my dead were supposed to rest. And that could not continue. Vivian Ashcroft lost her presidency before the month ended. The board held an emergency meeting without champagne, without ribbon, without her standing at the podium turning greed into community language. Magnolia Ridge was ordered to fund the restoration, preserve the burial site, and pay for every marker they had removed, cracked, buried, or ground into the soil. The day they reinstalled the iron gate, I brought Grandpa Samuel's key. The new hinges squealed when the workers lifted it into place. Fresh black paint shone against the morning light. The air smelled like cut cedar, damp earth, and stone dust again, but this time the dust came from new markers being carved, not old ones being destroyed. 33 names were placed back in stone. My parents. My grandparents. Cousins. Uncles. And Lily Grace Whitmore. Her lamb marker could not be made whole, so I asked the mason to set the cracked original into the base of the new one. The broken little marble lamb rested beneath her name like a witness that had survived long enough to testify. I stood there after everyone left, holding the old deed folder under one arm and the iron key in my palm. The fairway was gone. The villas were empty. Vivian's perfect green lie had been peeled off the land like cheap carpet over hardwood. For the first time in months, the cemetery sounded right. Birds in the trees. Wind through grass. Silence with dignity in it. Justice did not shout over the bulldozers. It waited in a deed book, under my grandfather's handwriting, until the people who erased our names had to read every single one out loud.